This is episode 1. This is the Starbucks episode. So welcome back to The Learning Curve with Sid and Alex. I'm Sid.
I'm Alex.
Starbucks, for those of you that don't know, is the world's largest coffee house chain. They started in 1971, and they have over 35,000 locations today. For reference, or just another frame point to use, McDonald's has 40,000 restaurants worldwide. Subway has 37,000. So the fact that Starbucks has 35,000 is bananas. It is 3 times larger than Dunkin' is when you think of like a global coffee footprint, and currently has a $110 billion market cap with 400 employees or partners worldwide. Awesome. So jumping in, this is Sid here. It's June 1st, 2025. Alex and I first recorded this episode in December 2024. There have been a few changes since then that we want to comment on before we release this episode, and just add a little more context where needed. So one of those things is market cap. So shortly after we recorded this episode, I'll say Wall Street, or the public in general, responded well to Brian Nichols on a few interviews where he talked about his business strategy and plans for Starbucks, and they jumped from that $110 billion market cap to 130. It was a pretty significant rise, and at first it felt like, oh, okay, like they're making quite a big turnaround already, and Alex and I might be eating some of our words later in this episode. But today, as of June 1st, their market cap is back down. It's around $90 billion in market cap. They've really struggled in Q1, Q2 of 2025, which we'll get into towards the end of the episode. But we wanted to kind of sit on the topic of market cap a little bit, just to make sure we can dive into it. One is where that metric is useful, and also where it's a flawed metric, and what are some of the other KPIs you could look at when you're comparing companies in the same industry or companies across industry. So market cap is one of the most commonly used metrics to value companies. The formula is fairly simple. It's just share price times the total number of outstanding shares. So how many shares are available to purchase or sell. The pros of market cap is that it's simple and quick to calculate. It's generally considered a liquidity indicator. So large cap stocks or companies with a large market cap are generally seen as more liquid and less volatile compared to small cap stocks. And then it generally does a good job of reflecting investor sentiment. So price can quickly change based on expectations. And your total market cap, because it takes in share price times total number of outstanding shares, you can often see, like, when the price rises for that share, that investors are bullish on that specific company. So that's how you can take in investor sentiment on the company's future performance in this metric. The largest cons of using market cap when you're comparing companies is that there's huge stock price volatility, right? So if people are bullish, or the CEO goes on the news and says something that investors didn't want to hear, it can quickly change the market cap of a company. And this is why you've probably seen, or why we've all seen, like Starbucks, for example, go from an $80 billion market cap to a $130 billion market cap to back to like a $90 billion market cap, all within the span of 8 months. It's also, if any of y'all are Reddit investors, you can kind of quickly see how you can change the overall market cap of a company by hyping it up so much that there are large buy calls or large actions to sell a stock and like completely crash the market value of the company. So stock price volatility is that first con. The second con is an overvaluation or undervaluation risk. So just because a company has a high market cap doesn't mean it's fundamentally strong when it comes to its financial statements, right? Bubbles and hype can drive valuations far beyond rational levels, and generally that's what causes bubbles to burst and market caps to plummet, really. And then third, it ignores debt and cash. So market cap only considers equity value and doesn't account for a company's debt or cash reserves, making it an incomplete measure of total enterprise value. Alex, I know you've had your kind of issues with the market cap KPI in general. Anything to add?
I think it's interesting to think about just like when we see like a stock price in general, right? Like that stock price might fluctuate by like $1 or $2.
Yep.
And that's where it really gets reflected into market cap because you have so many shares outstanding. That like what we might see as like just a couple dollars changing is like could be like millions or billions of dollars at the market cap level. I think the part that I have always speculated on is there's just some market caps that feel almost irrational from like industry to industry, right? So like you see those tech companies with obscenely high market caps, but like from the other kind of like financial KPIs, they aren't necessarily outperforming other companies by that much. It's this market cap that almost feels like a bet on the future. And it feels like there's no actual like risk calculation sometimes when they bet on the future. But yeah,
that's a good point. Like when you look at historically technology, right? That's the sector I think everybody can point at and say overvalued, right? If you look at any kind of technical investing, the market caps there are far beyond what they look like in any other industry. Maybe oil is like the small exception. But yeah, to your point, it doesn't really take in the risk of that bubble popping or that R&D not coming to fruition. So some alternatives to market cap. One is price to earnings ratio. So price to earnings ratio or PE ratio is really your market cap over your net income. So stock price over earnings per share. The two ways to calculate it, but really just means the same thing. It's useful because what it shows is how much investors are willing to pay for each dollar of earnings. So a high PE ratio suggests either growth expectations or overvaluation, where a low PE ratio can indicate undervaluation or a lack of growth prospects. So it's kind of up to interpretation, and you need the business context and industry context around a specific stock or company to understand what that ratio or KPI means. To your point, again, some industries naturally have a high PE ratio, so you can't really compare PE ratios across industries. Like you can look at Starbucks' PE ratio and compare it to Microsoft's PE ratio and then make a decision on which one's a better buy, because like a technology company will generally always have a larger PE ratio, right? But it is useful to compare companies within the same industry because you could look at how consistent, or you could imagine like the growth expectations and prospects can be somewhat consistent across from environmental variables, and then look at which company might be doing better specifically, or which one might be a better buy. So if you look at Starbucks PE and it's, let's just say 37, right? So investors are willing to pay $37 for each dollar of earnings. You could take it one of two ways. You could say that investors believe that Starbucks will have strong earnings growth in the future, and that's why it has this premium valuation today. Or you could say it's overvalued, right? If you look at, like, let's say McDonald's or Luckin Coffee, which is their biggest competitor in China, and look at their PE ratios. Like Luckin had a PE ratio of 24 at the same time Starbucks had a PE ratio of 37. It could indicate that Luckin is a better buy right now because you can essentially spend less to get the same dollar worth of earnings. But it can also mean that Starbucks has a higher growth expectation than Luckin does. So it's up to interpretation. I will note that Luckin got into a lot of trouble for fraud in the past year, so I wouldn't put all my money in Luckin, even though from a PE ratio perspective, it looks like a better buy. They fabricated over $300 million in sales and got delisted from the NASDAQ, so probably not the best buy. But an interesting competitive story to watch as Starbucks tries to regain ground in China. Beyond PE ratio, some of the other indicators you could look at are price to sales, price to book value, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization, and then free cash flow. Free cash flow is a big one. Tech companies generally have a lot of free cash flow, but that's where, like, when you look at Apple, for example, Apple's always had a large cash reserve, which has always made it such an interesting stock to look at because, like, even though their market cap is large, they can just buy Disney outright in cash, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Cool. So circling back to Starbucks, Alex, I know your drink of choice is boba, but what kind of relationship have you had with Starbucks over the years?
Yeah, so I think just from like my relationship with coffee, right? Like it very much started with I was in driver's ed, falling asleep every day, and coffee very
Just falling asleep at the wheel.
yeah, literally.
Oh my
yeah. But no, it quickly became like a crutch for like staying up, like getting used to using caffeine more as like a tool. But I think eventually once I made it into college, right, like just the culture of college was like, hey, like grab some coffee, stay up late, like you got to study.
Yeah.
It really became like a crutch for me.
So that's when you started going to Starbucks more often?
Yeah. So I think like my time spent like studying in Starbucks like doubled, tripled.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
Makes sense. Gotcha. At the Culk? Yeah. For those of you that don't know or didn't listen to our welcome to the podcast episode, Alex and I both went to Georgia Tech. The Culk, the Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons, was the place everybody really studied outside the library, I guess. And there was a Starbucks. And that was actually my first introduction to Starbucks as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll be honest, the reason I am kind of interested in this story, one is because Howard Schultz did a masterclass a couple years ago. And I thought it was an interesting take on leadership. I thought there was some good nuggets of wisdom there. And then when they hired Lakshman Narasimhan over from PepsiCo to lead Starbucks, all the jokes in the Indian community were, all right, this Indian man who's talking about non-coffee based innovation is finally going to bring chai, real chai, like masala chai, to Starbucks. And I didn't think that was actually going to happen, but it was wishful thinking that it would. And I was rooting for him. It didn't work out for Lakshman. I hope he's doing well, but it was interesting to see Howard Schultz kind of come back again, still be very involved, and now they are on their maybe fourth CEO in the past few years. So it's interesting to see how Starbucks turns it around, because they've really struggled post-COVID or even during COVID as well. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I think most recently people will point to the protest, right? People are actively boycotting Starbucks for their stance on Israel-Palestine. Starbucks, though, doesn't really comment much on that. If you're listening to their earnings calls, even though they're talking about declining sales quarter over quarter, they don't really touch the protests too much publicly. I don't know if it's a fear of validating, pushing, or encouraging protests that they avoid it altogether. But from an operations perspective, they've also really struggled. There are longer wait times. Customers are frustrated. Baristas feel overworked and underpaid, leading to this whole unionization effort. So they have to battle that. And you can kind of argue that their focus is a little bit split between getting a good operation back in place and also union busting, which I'm not accusing Starbucks of. Or I guess managing union relationships and labor relations. So the focus there is a little split. And then with rising costs in terms of, one, inflation on their side, right? They'll see that in their supply chain. But two, consumers feeling pressure in the economy, especially globally. There's some shrinkage in sales there, where you have other players trying to offer or have been offering lower priced coffee-based drinks. And they've really been able to steal back some of the market from Starbucks today, where consumers are feeling that price pressure.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. So let me sum it up to make sure I understand it. And also, this is going to be a long tangent, so we can cut it. But it almost feels like this is, like for context, like we work at Disney, right? Like this is something we're also seeing. Lines are longer. People are paying more to come.
Right.
They're getting, and because these lines are longer, right? They're also getting a poorer experience. The employees at Disney also are feeling more pressure, right? Like not necessarily understaffed, but right, like we're having to operate more efficiently to try to lower some of those wait times. But it feels like a pretty parallel, pretty clear parallel here.
I think a lot of people, or a lot of organizations, especially one that had large operations, focuses engaging one-on-one with their guest or customer, really struggled post-COVID, when there was a long break, a lot of furloughs, a lot of people who had the experience didn't come back.
Yep.
Right. So you had to redo training programs. You had to bring in new people. People make the argument that there are different expectations from employees now, and I think those are us to make the right expectations for employees to have. I think we're comfortable with that.
Gotcha.
But it takes time to train and get processes efficient again when you've had such a long break. And it's been a couple of years, almost I'll say 2 years since like quote unquote end of COVID and somewhat of a return to normalcy. But we're talking about, folks that had decades of experience working in these chains, or even in Disney, right?
Yep.
Ride operators that had decades of experience doing that at an efficient level, who had seen efficiency projects come and go, understood what worked well and what didn't, and were able to, whether through oral training or just being a part of the system and managing, able to push that information forward.
Gotcha. Yeah. So to sum it up, like, I think it sounds like turnover is probably one of the major factors in some of the declining in terms of like financial performance, operational performance.
Yeah. And that's also, it comes with like the cyclical nature of a business, right? Where post-COVID or even during COVID, a lot of corporations were making money. When there was a sense of return to normalcy, I'd make the argument that the focus for a lot of corporations was revenue first, right? Let's get our revenue targets back on track. Let's make money. And generally, that's what happens with a company, right? They'll try and make a ton of money, staff up, scale, and then try and become leaner. I feel like this is Starbucks now trying to become leaner again and more operationally efficient.
Gotcha. Cool.
But they kind of have to, right?
Yeah. Like the goal of the business is to make money, right? So you gotta,
like, if you're not gonna budge on price and your consumers are feeling price pressure, you better be efficient.
Yeah, it sounds like, like consumers are feeling price pressure. And even before, like when I was going to Starbucks pretty frequently, right? Like it felt like Starbucks was always a pretty premium option for coffee, right? Like Panera is like $3. Starbucks, I'm not getting anything under $5. It feels like they're pretty stubborn on like that price point, right?
Yeah, and I think their third place was called into question during COVID, right? They bake the experience of being in, well, one, getting a Starbucks and making it part of your lifestyle and your brand, but then two, if you have the time to sit at a Starbucks, like that was people's place, right? It was to sit, hang, do their work at a Starbucks. During COVID, that wasn't really happening. And then if you had formed this habit in your consumers, the habit was outbroken, and you have to retrain that habit or make people willing to come back and sit there and make it a third place for them again. And so there's a possibility that there was loss, but they're in the right places to make that happen, right? They're at college campuses. They're in areas with high traffic. So it's all very doable from that perspective. But I can imagine that there's a break in customer habits and even associations during that time that need to be reformed. And they should have more or less reformed now. The boycotts certainly don't help. But yeah. Cool. So we're going to talk about business strategy first, talk about humble beginnings for Starbucks and where this all began. Starbucks actually started the same year as Walt Disney World, 1971, big year. It was founded by 3 friends in Seattle, but it didn't start as a cafe. It was a small shop that sold high-quality coffee beans, teas, spices, and they were inspired by Alfred Peet of Peet's Coffee. So they were trying to mimic that business model, adopted a very similar approach, roasted their own beans, and then sold them to consumers to take home. So American coffee culture at this time was still very much buy beans, make coffee on your own. And people can make the argument that the quality of beans were not honestly that great, but the idea of a coffee house or a cafe culture wasn't really there yet, right? People were just roasting beans, selling spices, selling teas, so that people can enjoy it at their home, at their own time, at their leisure. Howard Schultz really transformed this business. He was the catalyst and the turning point for Starbucks. He came in 1982, so 11 years later, as the director of retail operations and marketing. And it's interesting that he had that kind of role, and I feel like you'd find it interesting too. Like operations and marketing, in my mind, have always felt like very different work streams.
Okay, yeah, I'm about to tangent a little bit. Having gone to Georgia Tech, studied industrial engineering, I think both of us have read The Goal.
Yeah.
I recently reread it, and actually one of the key conclusions at the end for an efficient business is to actually tie sales and operations together, right? Because you're technically not generating any true, if you think of true throughput of a business, right? It's the ability to turn products and sell them. And so in my head, right, actually tying operations and marketing together makes some amount of sense, right? Because you need marketing is how you generate your demand, operations is how you provide the capacity and the supply. And so having the two of them in balance is how you run a lean business. But not to say that that still feels like a pretty innovative mix of roles.
I guess a great, I don't want to say synergistic role, but a great role or structure to have in a business is someone who's able to look at the operation, look at your demand, and make sure the two are in sync so you can actually handle it.
And even then, it's like, hey, if I do have like extra capacity in my operation, like let me staff up marketing. Like, where can I find my break even between like marketing costs, generating demand, and my operational efficiencies? Yeah.
I don't know who you think of as the face of Starbucks. Howard Schultz, in my mind, has always been the face of Starbucks.
Yeah. I'll be fully honest. Like, I don't follow a ton of like Starbucks executive like news. I don't know. I think of Starbucks, I think of white girls. Yeah, we probably caught that part out. My bad.
But he did transform the business, right? Okay. An incredible performance as CEO. I think folks now, especially with his take on unions and labor relations, even maybe the Palestine stance he takes, people will see him in a different light. But his performance as CEO was still fairly incredible for like growing the business, making it what it is today. And he's been incredibly relevant and integrated with Starbucks even after leaving the role. He's been outspoken in the media generally. He's outspoken on his own profiles on like LinkedIn about his thoughts on where the vision of Starbucks is going and how Starbucks is operating. And it makes sense, right? He probably has a ton of stock and is still invested in this business, and he was, people consider him the founder of this business. But he's also had to step back in the role as CEO multiple times, right? So he was CEO when I guess when he purchased Starbucks from the original owners. He stepped down in 2000, came back in 2008, stepped down again after 2017 or 2016, and then came back again post-COVID, and is now, given off the reins to someone else. But he's still very involved. And I think it can be tough when you think of like CEO successions and succession planning. When you have a CEO who's done so well and is still so involved, it can be hard to transition effectively, especially when you can lean on him to come back and kind of put the business back in place, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. Out of curiosity then, do you think Starbucks is such a unique business that it's truly the only one where Howard Schultz is so tied to it, and like his vision for the business is so clean because he's the one who kind of like guided it to where it is today, and now like Starbucks is in this unique position where like only the person who guided it to like where it is today can continue to guide it?
That's a good point. Like, fortunately for Starbucks, the founder or person who put it in place, I guess he didn't start Starbucks, but he made it what it is today with his vision, is still around, knows what the thought the vision was originally, what was successful for them, has seen failure, and when people try and stray away from its, I guess, mission or core principles, able to put it back into place where it's kind of back set up.
Gotcha.
Whereas other businesses kind of falter when that CEO or founder isn't around anymore.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool. When he came to Starbucks originally, right, in 1982, he was recruited to help the founders with their vision of expanding Starbucks, right? They just wanted to expand Starbucks' number of stores, but they still wanted to sell tea, spices, roasted beans. Schultz, on the other hand, was inspired by Italian coffee culture, and he loved the idea of espresso bars that were serving as community gathering spaces. So he wanted to bring that culture back to the U.S. He said that cafes were more than just places to grab a quick cup of coffee. They were vibrant social hubs where people connected, and he was able to, transform Starbucks in this way and really start that third place nomenclature where people are looking for a location outside of their work or home where they can find that welcoming environment and sense of community.
Got you. Quick, thought on that culture piece. So the idea of an espresso bar in Italy, my understanding of this is it's almost like a bar, right? Like it's like a social gathering place. At this point, America also has bars. So is it thought that it's a daytime bar of sorts?
Yeah, and that's maybe a good way to compare it. So coffee house culture as a social gathering space goes back hundreds of years at this point, right? But it didn't really exist in America in the same way. So if you go back maybe a few centuries, I think 15th to 16th century in the Middle East, the concept of coffee houses as catalysts for these intellectual conversations and social progress really found their footing. When you think of a tavern and a pub, right, it's a ton of alcohol consumption, generally more rowdiness and impaired judgment. I think people were still going to taverns in like the afternoon, or even at lunch. They would have beers because at times it was safer than water to drink. But coffee houses, on the other hand, provided a beverage that was safe to drink, allowed you to maintain sobriety, and had caffeine, right? So now you had energized, sober people able to discuss with one another without any impaired judgment, right? So they were pushing ideas on each other in such a fashion that in 17th century England, people called coffee houses penny universities, because the level of intellectual discourse was available to you just for the price of a cup of coffee. So again, America's a little slow on this wave. There are no tea houses, no coffee houses in the same way, or if they exist regionally in a small capacity. And Americans didn't really drink a ton of coffee until after, I believe it was World War I or World War II, when instant coffee was brought back home from American soldiers, and then they developed a taste and an appetite for coffee and caffeine.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, then thought experiment then.
Yeah.
I guess in my head, one of the key points of success then for this, like bringing a culture over, right? It's like, how do you transition and introduce that culture to people? Do you think it was easier in America because like it's effectively the transition from bars at night to bars during the day, and in sobriety, right? So in my head, right, like we're starting to near prohibition, right? Like post World War II. Am I wrong? That's totally the wrong timeline. Yeah, that's before. That's way before. Yeah, oops, my bad. But yeah, like I guess like in my head, if you're trying to build like or if you're trying to encourage like a very functioning society, right? Like you're trying to create, like you'd want to imitate that kind of like intellectual environment.
That's where I'm curious if there was a little more detail on Howard Schultz's original vision, where he talked about this place or this coffee house culture providing community. I don't know if he envisioned it being a place for political discussion and intellectual thought, more than being a place where people feel welcomed and can like sit and enjoy themselves and again feel that sense of community. So I think that's where like the vision of like his and what maybe it was in Europe and the Middle East centuries ago is a little different. I imagine it's a need he saw in his communities. If it's Seattle, it's probably during the winter when there's people, where people kind of need a place to go indoors, and enjoy themselves and find that sense of community. You have to remember this is back in the day when people didn't have laptops and phones, because if you went to a Starbucks today, people are either hanging out with their friends or on their own devices and not really engaging with each other as much.
Gotcha. Yeah. I had a thought.
Come back to us.
Yeah.
But so a couple of important notes. That was his vision. He wanted to bring this coffee house community culture to the U.S. The founders don't really jive with his vision. They don't see it the same way. They want Starbucks to continue being a roastery and have these retail products and goods. So he leaves. He leaves after 3 years, starts his own coffee house, embodying that vision, and has massive traction, right? People love the idea. If he's seeing his coffee stores or coffee houses fill up, a few more years go by, and he is able to get some backers and investors and then buy Starbucks from the original founders for around $4 million, and then merges the two coffee house chains and then just calls them Starbucks.
Gotcha.
Yeah, cool. So he kind of did this proof of concept. They did really well. And then for expansion, he purchased his whole company.
Yeah. I mean, out of curiosity then, do you like think that was a smart move, right? Because what does the transition look like from that old company, right? Because you're essentially selling a retail like packaged product, and now you're switching to like a cafe style. I guess in my head, there's some amount of setup cost there. Does that make sense?
I guess setup cost one, and transition from everything you need to do, and even the training, right? You would imagine people working at a roastery at that time know how to make coffee for themselves. But to do it efficiently and then create such an atmosphere that's welcoming requires a lot of interior design costs, building costs, construction costs, training costs. But I think fortunately for him, one, I think they had the cash flow in the profit margins, and two, he was already familiar enough with the business where, because he was in charge of both operations and marketing, he knew how to effectively maneuver or transition them into that style of business. And I imagine like he brought over a lot of his own people too, right? So it's not as though he went back and just did Starbucks and had to transform Starbucks. He maintained a lot of the new coffee houses he created and brought over the leaders from that department because they merged the two companies. Yeah.
I know that one of the major challenges of the expansion of bubble tea in the US actually has been supply chain. So I wonder if one of the pieces of rationale for him merging with Starbucks, the original Starbucks, was because they did have a supply chain with beans, and at this point, I'm assuming the business of coffee is still relatively young in the US. And so to have a coffee bean supply chain, a solid coffee bean supply chain, is really what enables a successful cafe business.
That's a good call out there. It's like, by merging with Starbucks, you have folks that are well acquainted with the supply chain, have this like supplier relationships to bring that forward, which probably makes it a little easier for them to do overall. Yeah. The coffee house was called Giornale. It's my best pronunciation of it. It's an Italian word. Again, he was inspired by coffee bars of Milan. So he started two Giornale, the coffee house, and then merged that back into Starbucks. I'm glad it calls it Starbucks instead of Giornale. Yeah. But under his leadership, Starbucks takes off, right? They start expanding aggressively throughout the US and then internationally. They focused on creating, one, a unique customer experience. What they say is high quality coffee, not in Starbucks. And then premium service with a strong focus on being operationally efficient, right? He has come back multiple times in his role as CEO saying that they need to bring the operational efficiency back to the forefront. So it is, as to IE, is really encouraging to see a CEO take it to that level and say like, hey, not just sales, not just promotions, like we need to make sure we have an efficient process in place to make sure we're getting drinks out quickly. And then even our strategy around foods, pastries, any other items, the operation is kept in mind because you're thinking about the operational tax almost on your baristas, on your partners to take that on and get that out and maintain the atmosphere of an efficient process and a streamlined process as well. Yep. So he's really focusing on creating a great operation, and then designing the store in such a way where people feel comfortable to gather, relax, and they invested heavily in design, lighting, music, furniture to create that atmosphere for being a third place. He also started selling Starbucks as a lifestyle brand, right? So they were not just selling coffee; they were selling an experience. Almost a luxury premium item where you can kind of show off as a status symbol as well to your friends, as well as a place where people can linger and have a sense of belonging. So he's selling the community, like you'll be a part of the Starbucks community, and it's a part of your lifestyle too. And they bake this into their business model, right? I think when you think of the profit margins that Starbucks has, it's consistently been around 70%, which is much higher than the industry average. One, they have good supplier relations and keep costs pretty low, but their prices are so much higher, right? If you're Dunkin', I'm Starbucks, we're both paying 10, 15 cents for coffee. You're selling it for $3, I'm selling it for $5, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Same thing with like their add-ons, right? We think syrups, milks, anything else they add. For a long time, there's generally been like that extra little upcharge, and then the profit margins on those upcharges are also incredibly high. So if they charge you 50 cents for a syrup shot, 2 syrup blasts, 2 pumps. The cost on that is incredibly low, but then they upcharge you so that their profit margin either is maintained at that 70% level or even a little higher. So when you think of Starbucks' cost in order of like highest cost down, rent and space, usually the top. You have SG&A, labor, and then cost for ingredients for food, and then cost for ingredients for beverages. Beverages is like their lowest cost. Let's forget this. Selling, general, administrative. This is all of the kind of marketing that goes into it and administrative costs of the business.
Gotcha. Yeah. Like the IEs.
Yeah, like the IEs. And I took rent out of that. Rent sometimes included in SG&A. I just wanted to put rent at the forefront because of all of their costs. Like usually they are trying to be in high traffic areas, expensive areas in general because they want to be a part of that brand. And so they'll pay for that luxury. They have really focused on coffee-based innovation for a long time, right? This is a term that you'll see Howard Schultz use whenever he's really talking about Starbucks, his vision, how they get back on track. He talks about two things, right? He talks about operations and operational efficiency, caring about the guests and make sure they have a high-quality experience. And then he talks about coffee-based innovation. And they've had a lot of success with coffee-based innovation, especially non-coffee-based innovation to a degree, but they've really done a great job of opening a new market for themselves and creating almost a new canvas of innovation. And we'll get into that in a bit. Sometimes the drinks, the new coffee-based drinks are pretty awful in my experience, but they stay relevant. They give people something to come back to, something novel and new that they can try, and keeps them in that conversation of, this is the brand, this is the experience. Have you tried this new thing that they put out?
Gotcha. For my context, just grounding, right? Coffee-based innovation, is that like a pumpkin spice latte? So the extension beyond a latte.
Yes, a lot of it is flavorings, right? A lot of it is flavorings. But I will give Starbucks a lot of credit for quote-unquote coffee-based innovation. And I think this is a perfect segue into it. When we think of menu strategy diversification, that's played a crucial role for them in their growth. Not just like growth in the US, but they needed to have a good menu strategy to expand globally, right? When you think of coffee-based innovation, right, they have some signature drinks that really allow them to rocket ship almost. They've tried to appeal to a spectrum of coffee drinkers. They have drinks or products that they've attempted to make very high quality and serve like coffee aficionados with varying success. I think it depends on who you ask and which coffee aficionado you ask. But then they've also done an extremely good job at crafting drinks and products for non-coffee drinkers and then getting them into the habit of drinking a coffee-based drink. So they may not truly invent every new drink that they popularize on their menu, but they have a knack for making it their own and then making it very popular with their fan base. So the first one comes to mind. Can you guess what it is?
Frappuccinos.
The Frappuccino in 1995. A lot of people in the U.S., I guess for a lot of people in the U.S., Starbucks can be their introduction to coffee or introduction to enjoying coffee, almost like a gateway drug, right? And I say that half jokingly because it does have caffeine, and caffeine is addictive, and it's a drug. It even got me this way. I never enjoyed coffee growing up, right? Coffee houses, coffee shops weren't really popular in St. Thomas. My parents did not drink coffee whatsoever. For those that don't realize, I am an Indian man. My parents drank chai twice a day, right? Masala chai twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. They never let me or my sister drink chai for all sorts of, I guess, like...
the immigrant parent superstitions.
Yeah, superstitions. They thought that drinking chai would make me shorter.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Sid is really tall. Really tall, some might say.
Yes, yeah, I guess depending on where, like...
Maybe it was the caffeine, Like he didn't have any caffeine.
Maybe not drinking caffeine, not eating anything with lemon in it, and not lifting weights really helped me skyrocket or just maximize my growth potential. But yeah, so they never let us have coffee. They thought it would make us short. They thought it would like mess with the color of our skin. They would only ever let us drink chai when we were older and only in the evening. So they didn't think about like how it would mess up our sleep. But that was my parents' rule, right? Just chai. So didn't enjoy coffee. Never had a habit of it. But freshman year, Georgia Tech, I think I told a friend of mine, that I'd never really had coffee or don't really enjoy it, and she was shocked. She was a big Starbucks drinker. Absolutely loves Starbucks and like probably drinks like 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day. I feel like it was a personal vendetta to get me hooked on Starbucks. I think that was the goal she had in mind. She was a psychology student or major as well, so this one makes me laugh because she took me to Starbucks and gave me a Java chip frappuccino, and like I was instantly hooked. Like it was a dessert. It is
a socially acceptable milkshake to drink in the middle of the day.
100%. But it, like it hooked me. And now I drink black coffee twice a day, maybe. And I've gone on the completely other side of the spectrum. Like there's no sugar in my coffee today. But it got me hooked. And it gets a lot of people hooked just as almost like a gateway into coffee. And then you rely on Starbucks more and more for other coffee-based products where they have a little less sugar. What is your relationship to coffee today? Where did that come from?
Honestly, I think I fell asleep in my first driver's ed class, and if you've ever been in my car, you maybe that makes a little more sense now. But I was basically just trying to find a way to stay awake. I think I was at 16 at the time. Also, immigrant parents try to keep me away from caffeine as much as possible. But eventually, my mom was like, "All right, I'm not paying money for your driver's ed for you to sleep through it. Here's a giant cup of black coffee. Go crazy, kid."
She just gave you black coffee, no sugar, no
black
cream.
coffee as like, and I hate bitter food. Yeah. She was really just like she treated it as like a drug or like as medicine, and was like, use this, stay awake, finish your driver's ed.
Wow. It's like throwing you in deep end, man. Like I started with a Java chip frappuccino, loved it. And then, because I didn't have any money in college, I started trying to make my own mochas in the dining hall at North Ave.
What'd you take? The chocolate chips?
Yeah, I would have
the pancake chocolate chips.
I've definitely done that. Like I do not put it past me. Like 100%, I've tried every cheap, ridiculous way to make a sugary coffee in North Ave, especially like taking a hot chocolate powder and throwing it in my coffee, all sorts of nonsense just to get a kick out of it, and then slowly graduated up the coffee chain, and now there's a sugar in my coffee.
I think I always viewed coffee as like a tool, right? Like it's a tool to stay awake, right? It's a tool to stay focused. But I'd say the office and like just coffee being free in the office has definitely created kind of like a habit loop for me now. And so,
I mean, you got espressos.
Yeah, we got an espresso machine in our office, so start my day off with coffee.
There you go. But yeah, go back to the Frappuccino.
Your Frappuccino.
The success of the Frappuccino can't be understated, right? It quickly became a customer favorite, and drove massive sales again for younger demographics, right? It was a dessert you could have in the middle of the day or in the morning that was socially acceptable. And this is like a trend in American culture, right? Donuts for breakfast, for example. Like the idea for sweet breakfast is very much alive and has been alive.
I don't know why I never drew that connection.
What?
Donuts for breakfast.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it?
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. So again, like when you have other worldviews, like it's kind of shocking how sweet American breakfasts are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Waffles, pancakes. The name cake is in the thing.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I guess where my head's at, right, is like, I guess like bagels would be comparable for a donut,
like a savory. Yeah. That's interesting. Like we're curious to jump into this later when we think about like Dunkin', for example, right? Dunkin', America runs on Dunkin'. They were selling sweet donuts, sweet breakfast for a long time. I still do. But that's where it became a thorn in their side when they tried to expand globally. India, for example, Dunkin' really struggled in India because even though in the US they're seen as a breakfast stop because they, someone will get their coffee, they get a donut, they're ready for work. Indians don't have sweet breakfasts. The Indians have very savory breakfast. I'm generalizing, but generally in India, people have savory breakfast if they have breakfast at all. And so Dunkin' was seen as a dessert place. And so why would you get your morning coffee at a dessert place? And so it they were called Dunkin' Donuts for a long time, and issues, challenges, roadblocks like that when they're trying to expand globally and have to now cater to a wide variety of tastes kind of led them to lean more into breakfast sandwiches, more breakfast items. They took the word donuts out of their whole name and just became Dunkin'. But they kind of pushed the same way to be more relevant in that space globally. Yeah. And then back to the Frappuccino and Starbucks, it gave them, I would say, a new canvas for innovation by expanding their offerings, right? Up until this point, maybe they had like an iced coffee, but they were generally mostly hot coffee beverages. But the Frappuccino opened up a whole market for blended drinks, like ice blended drinks, and a new market for cold dessert-like drinks that appeal to even non-coffee drinkers. So instead of like where you were the roastery, where you started as a cafe culture, now you can come to Starbucks even if you don't like coffee, right? Because there's a wide variety of things for you to enjoy, and things that'll still get you hooked, And that's not on them. That's just the nature of coffee and caffeine. Outside the Frappuccino, you mentioned it before, seasonal drinks. Starbucks has mastered the art of creating buzz with its seasonal drinks. The pumpkin spice latte, the PSL, the peppermint mocha. They are limited time offerings that create that sense of urgency for customers, and they kind of mark different times of the year, right? Like the PSL for a lot of people is like, it is the hallmark of the fall season starting. The peppermint mocha, Christmas, right? Like that's how you know fall is upon us. But Starbucks, not unlike a certain theme park company, continues to allow these seasonal beverages to expand, encroach more into other seasons just so they can extend their window. And you know exactly what I'm talking about or referencing when I say, like, when you think of Mickey's Not So Scary.
Oh, Magic Kingdom.
Just encroaching more and more in the summer months to allow more guests to experience the event. And, for Starbucks, allow more customers to enjoy the PSL. But that is like now a cultural, like, flag point for when a season is starting or ending. You a big PSL guy?
No, I don't get the appeal.
With their seasonal drinks, again, it still allows them a new space to play in terms of innovation or coffee-based innovation, right? Most of them are coffee-based drinks. They'll have a hot version and a cold brew generally, or an iced version. And then every year, every few months, they might come out with more interesting, innovative flavors. So I think spring this year, the lavender flavored coffees came out. And then this fall, I believe they introduced the pecan crunch latte, and salted pecan cream cold brew. So again, continuing to push the flavor boundaries, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, slight tangent.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was a year ago. Or actually, I think it was the spring, like kind of paired with the lavender stuff.
Yeah.
They brought in olive oil.
I loved the olive oil coffee. No cap.
Okay. What was the appeal of it? Was it like, in my head, it was just a laxative, but like...
I didn't. Coffee on its own does that for you. Anyway, I think, I'm trying to remember the story behind this. I think Howard Schultz went back to Italy or Europe and was inspired by, I don't know if he saw somebody put olive oil in coffee or he just liked olive oil and thought to combine the two. But it allowed for a creamier coffee drink, especially for those that were unable to consume milk, like dairy milk. And although Starbucks does have other like dairy-based alternatives, I think that was a part of it. Was like there's a lot of flavor both in coffee and there's a lot of flavor in a good olive oil. So if you combine the two or let the olive oil carry, you should get some interesting, unique flavors. Other companies have done this, like with Salt and Straw, making olive oil ice cream. So combining olive oil that's generally a little more savory, or a good olive oil is supposed to be spicy a little bit, into a dairy or coffee-based drink is not necessarily new. But yeah, that's something they definitely did. And they launched, I think, only at a few stores first. But I don't know how the performance, I don't know if it was enjoyed by the American market.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like, it just didn't feel that seasonal.
Yeah, I don't think it was seasonal, but
it was like an experiment.
Yeah, I think it was online for like 18 months, I believe.
Oh, 18.
It's been a while that they've introduced it, but it wasn't always available. Like I remember it was available in June last year when I went to Dallas, only at a specific store. because they gave it to us and they were, hey, we're trying this new drink, and I'd heard about it in the news. But it's curious that I'm interested to see what they've done with like the olive oil one. But they continue pushing the boundaries here. Sometimes it feels a bit gimmicky, but keeps them in the conversation, keeps things interesting, allows people to come back and try something new. Yeah. And then I will give them credit again. Do you ever put foam in your coffee? Like when you get a cold coffee?
Like a milk foam?
Yeah, a milk foam or a cream, like a cold in cream, like a cream.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
No, I usually take my coffee black.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I talked about the salted pecan cream cold brew. They also have like a pumpkin cream this time. So we think of like canvases for innovation again for Starbucks. One is the flavors of the coffee, the syrups, right? Another one is like the blended drinks. Another place where they're playing or continuing to innovate is in the cream in the foam. So they play with the creams flavors, but it's worth mentioning that one of the challenges with creams in coffee-based beverages has always been that like if you put a cream or like a foam on a hot drink, it melts instantly, right? You can't really enjoy a cream on top of a hot drink, but people want to. And so Starbucks came out with the Cloud Macchiato in 2019 that allowed this egg white-based foam and cream to be now put on people's drinks. I think there was like this whole issue with Ariana Grande being vegan as she drank a Cloud Macchiato. People were like, no, that has egg whites in it. But I will give them credit again for like they saw a need of, or a challenge that their consumers faced and wanted, and they were able to innovate on it and create a new concoction or product for those consumers. Cool. So kudos to Starbucks for that. Beyond coffee, right? They've had, I guess, innovations or just expansions more so into non-coffee based beverages and then food and drinks. Teas and refreshers were a big one, right? In 2012, they acquired Teavana and made a major push into the tea market. But they kind of had to, right? If they're thinking of and trying to expand globally, especially in Asia, they needed to have a wide variety of tea-based drinks to, one, cater to customers looking for a lighter, non-caffeinated option, but also just appeal to the Asian market where tea is much more popular than coffee.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, honestly, I feel like when I think of Starbucks, like outside of like the pumpkin spice latte, right, the next thing I think about is the matcha latte.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, no one.
Yeah. Feels like a place where they've gotten like a pretty strong foothold.
Yeah, I feel like it brought like matcha to the US in a way.
Yeah.
Or popularized it among me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like the one thing I always hear about, like at least from like the Asian American, like East Asian American side, it's like Starbucks I feel like has never really tried to attempt boba before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
And this is like from some knowledge base, but to my knowledge, like boba's like supply chain is pretty unique in terms of the tea you need, the tapioca itself. I know Starbucks this most recent summer they did like the popping boba with the refreshers,
right.
But I think that popping boba is a bit easier to acquire from like a supply chain.
Even from spoilage, right?
Yeah, and then spoilage, yeah, right. So like traditional like tapioca boba, right? Like you're having to cook it, right? So I'm assuming they're trying to balance that additional operational complexity. Plus, on top of that, right? Like you're cooking the boba, so you probably need more infrastructure or different infrastructure.
Yeah,
you need space and infrastructure in your shop. So I can see that as being like a key challenge. But yeah, I've always kind of wondered why they haven't made a huge push for that. Just because that feels like a core.
Like if you're in Asia appealing to those consumers, especially a younger demographic, like to your point, like, yeah, I was always shocked that they didn't play in the boba space when like that kind of pulls away a lot of people from their audience, right?
If I'm thinking about like kind of what you were talking about earlier and Starbucks being a place of community, being a place where people can hang out and chat, for me, right, I felt like I've always had to pick between like, do I want to like hang out at do I want to chat with you at Starbucks or are we going to boba shop, right? Because I grew up in a pretty Asian and American heavy suburb, where I feel like oftentimes, right, like one person might want just like, I might just want a black coffee, but the person I'm hanging out with wants a boba. So like we'll have to like make a choice, but it feels like there's almost like a market they're missing there, right? Like if they did have a boba drink, could see us going to Starbucks instead and kind of getting both. Versus now I'm going to boba shops and like you can get a black coffee at a boba shop now.
Yeah, this part's not hard for them in terms of like they have to, introduce a whole line of straws, cups. They'll take up some. It'll take up storage, and even from the distribution, like they'll have you pallets or boxes of those specific types of items. Whereas like your coffee cups are very different, your straws are very different. But to your point, it'll take a lot of space for them in their shop to make boba, cook boba, make sure it's not overcooked. And it does interfere a ton with their operation because it's just going to be, it's not the main focus of what they do. It will be a smaller portion of their drink portfolio. When you're making boba, do you have to monitor it? Can you overcook it?
Yeah, it's very easy to overcook. Right. And on top of that, right, like after you cook it, if it's not consumed in like the next hour, it starts getting hard. That's how like there's always optimal points of time to visit a boba shop, right? So you get like the freshest boba. But
I do like what they've done, at least with the popping pearls. Like that, it's like I wouldn't call it a compromise, but some small move that makes sense for Starbucks because they're not trying to again pay that operational tax, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Of setting things up, messing with their operation, increasing wait times. Popping boba has like I imagine a longer length of time before it becomes spoiled.
I'm pretty sure it comes in like a can.
Yeah, that's lost.
Yeah,
like you would have surrounded more.
Yeah, gotcha.
Food and snacks. Starbucks has a wide variety of pastries, sandwiches, breakfast items, not only to complement their coffee, but a big part of it is to push off their average transaction value, right? These add-on items. They encourage customers to sit and stay in their third place longer, or even consider Starbucks at third place in the first place. I know that's kind of confusing. If you are looking for a place outside your home where you can hang out, where you can be, where you can spend hours at a time, to not have food feels like a sin, right? Like if I can't eat there, I'm not going to stay there. So that's a part of it. And then they also drive people in during non-peak hours, like lunch and the late afternoon with these offerings. Because if it's just a coffee-based business, people generally aren't going to be coming in as frequently that much and in the afternoon. But by offering these, even though they have a much higher cost and lower profit margin, get more revenue overall, get more people through the door. They'll probably add some sort of coffee-based drink or now a non-coffee-based drink like a refresher to their total transaction, and Starbucks is making more money overall.
Gotcha.
It's kind of the corollary a little bit of like what fast food chains had to do to compete with Starbucks, right? Like McDonald's and a handful of other fast food chains have leaned more into coffee-based beverages, and where before you could only really get a black coffee or cream and sugar, they've added their own variety of syrups. I give them the kudos and the props for creating a coffee-based innovation on their part, I guess. But where they were offering food and Starbucks wasn't offering food for a while, like by offering coffee and then now offering food, they're able to compete the same spaces and they're directly competing with each other, especially in that breakfast hour.
Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about like the choice of items in their store. So I don't know the last time you've been to a Starbucks. I feel like decently recently in the past few months, right?
No, I was sorry. No, I was just thinking. No, I definitely make it like I've gone for like water cups before.
Oh, there you go. Oh. And there's one at every Disney theme park, so we see them all the time. But when you look at the items they have, whether it's pastries, sandwiches, protein boxes, it feels cleverly curated to minimize operational tax because they're not making any of the food. They're all pre-made.
Yep.
They just heat them up. Microwaves, the ovens. And so that allows them to maintain this operational efficiency, right? They just have to heat it up. And like that's where a lot of cafes, I feel like, try and do both and really struggle with their wait times. Starbucks is really trying to minimize the operational tax. They're like, okay, if you want a sandwich, people want a protein box, it is prepackaged. Sometimes they'll outsource it. And most of it's probably outsourced by a bakery, or the goods themselves already have their own branding on them. They're just collaborating with those brands to sell them to Starbucks. Yeah. So I think there's just like an interesting note of like, you can see that there was intention behind what type of items are on those menus. Yeah.
They're choosing, I almost feel like Starbucks, and I feel like I've seen the memes on it, right? Like you can create a crazy complex Starbucks like drink order and they will take it. But when it comes to food, right, there's almost no flexibility. It feels like, so they're truly prioritizing the drinks. And like on top of that, right, like as you customize your drink, that's more and more incremental revenue. And it feels like they've made a pretty smart play there in terms of focusing on drinks which are their most profitable sale, and then using food as really just like the catalyst to, like as you said, like kind of level out that demand a bit later in the day, make it easier for people to stay, longer durations too. But
yeah. And they've also, I give them credit, they've kept up well with customer trends. So when people wanted healthier alternatives, they leaned into like protein boxes and like those protein bars at Starbucks, and then they were pretty quick to jump on the alternative milk options. So we think of as they compete with like a McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or whatever fast food chain in the morning for that coffee rush. If people have those dietary restrictions or are leaning into that, Starbucks was very, I think, well prepared to provide that to consumers, where I think some other fast food chains were caught kind of slow-footed. Let's talk about adapting the menu for international markets. Right, Starbucks has expanded internationally, and it has to, like every other chain, kind of adapt to local tastes. It has a flexible menu strategy. They'll try and incorporate regional flavors, but they keep their core offerings recognizable. Have you been to a Starbucks outside the US?
I think once. So we were in Taiwan, and my mom,
Taiwanese.
Taiwanese. But I think, my mom had seen something online, which is like the Taiwanese like equivalent of like a social media. But she'd seen basically Starbucks was selling these prepackaged, once again, operational efficiency, egg rolls. So it's like a Taiwanese snack. It's not really an egg roll. Honestly, I don't know the English word for it, but it effectively translates to egg roll. It's dried. It's like a little like pastry almost. But it's a savory pastry, which is kind of weird. But they were in these containers that were just really, really cute. And like, apparently all of Taiwan was obsessed with it. I remember my mom dropped an obscene amount of money on these stupid egg rolls. But yeah, no, I think we ran to like 3 or 4 Starbucks in one day because they were sold out everywhere. And eventually she found them. I couldn't make her most recent trip, but Starbucks apparently this time was selling an umbrella. And she just thought the aesthetics of the umbrella were really good too. And also went crazy again and bought a bunch of umbrellas, left them in a bathroom in her Tokyo layover, and we've never seen them since.
That's funny. The umbrella piece reminded me of like the Starbucks cups that like grew in popularity. They continue to collaborate with other brands, Disney, Target, big one, or big two, to push out more like merch, and like they really leaned into like the collectible nature of like those sort of cups. And so you'll see people with like 10, 15, 20 different Starbucks cups, and the mugs, like the where have you been? It's like the part of, I guess, one of the cool points of being a franchise is a standardization, right? You kind of need to have a standard system in place so that people know what they're getting and can rely on you and depend on you to provide the same flavor profile, the same components of the drinks they're expecting. But then they also have mugs tailored to or designed for the area in which you're in. So like universities, like Georgia Tech, Starbucks, Korea had a ton of them, and they're really well designed. So like if you do find yourself at a Starbucks globally or just out of your norm, that there feels like there's the incentive to like get a Starbucks cup as the souvenir from that place because it combines both.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, having walked around like the Disney parks, the Universal theme parks, right? Like, honestly, yeah, like their mugs, like the design on them, I feel like outpaces both the Universal and Disney mugs themselves. And I think like in the last couple of years, I've seen them really lean into it and evolve those mugs. I honestly, I don't know how well their sales do, but I've seen them go from like just the theme parks now. They're going into the lands. And so now they're selling maybe like 4 mugs, whereas they would have been selling 1 mug before per guest. But yeah, definitely seen them lean into that strategy. And it's a cool, it's a cool mug, it's a cool collectible. The design philosophy is also consistent across Universal and Disney. And so in my head, that's like a pretty unique spot to be in terms of your merchandise, right? Like you've got a consistent design philosophy across competing businesses that you can collect.
Yeah, so they have the retail components that do well. It's a small, I think they break out the like products differently when you think of like company structure and reporting. They're a smaller part of their business, but still incredibly important. When we think of international items that have done well, matcha flavored beverages in Japan do well. The seasonal sakura cherry blossom flavored drinks. China, even though there's a love for tea in that market, and Starbucks pushed for Teavana refreshers to compete there, they introduced a black sesame frappuccino that did really well in China. The opportunity I feel like for Starbucks has always been, and I don't know why they don't lean more into this, is bringing back some of those regional seasonal flavors back to the US and introducing them to American consumers. Maybe just around specific holidays or in regions where there's a large ethnic group that would resonate with that flavor. But I haven't seen Starbucks do that much.
Yeah. I think jumping in real quick, like black sesame drinks are usually one of my favorite drinks. I can totally see it. Like, I feel like if you drop that in Atlanta, maybe just like a week around Lunar New Year,
Isn't it?
Could see it. But also, once again, like that's operational complexity. Oh, I feel like
aren't these just like extra ingredient? Like, is it the I guess matcha latte to be fair, like probably is like a whole thing.
Who put a black sesame matcha latte?
If you're doing a frappuccino and you're just kind of, what is the black? Is it just in the syrup? Is it?
Yeah. Well, if it's in the frappuccino, they're likely blending black sesame and sugar into the frappuccino. I guess it's just like having the black sesame on hand. But to be fair, right? Like you're standing up the procurement for the black sesame.
Yeah.
Like temporary procurement too, so the contract's probably more expensive.
Yeah, so if you were to do it, you have to find a flavor that would probably resonate and stick around.
Yep.
Matcha. Yeah, so that's always been an opportunity for Starbucks. Curious to see like if they start doing that with their new CEO, if they continue to lean into copy-based innovation, if they just pull from what they've done internationally. Like, if you've done the research once, it makes sense sometimes to use it in multiple places, right? Yep. You don't see Starbucks do this ton of pricing tangent, but you don't see Starbucks do a ton of promotions on price. They will generally give like higher rewards at times, but I feel like right now where they are experiencing, subsequent quarters of declining sales, moving around these drinks and flavors where they're probably easiest and don't cost a ton of money might be a good way to expand and just increase sales in a short term just to get them back on track. Back to that pricing comment, Starbucks takes that premium brand very seriously, even in markets where sales are down, like China right now, like in the US, and they're losing market share. They don't really compete on price, right? That can be a cardinal sin in a lot of industries when you start competing on price and you just keep driving prices lower. But, if they're strapped thin, performing poorly, and they're not playing on their home turf where they have well-funded, aggressive competitors pushing, again, China and Luckin Coffee being that, I'm curious to see how they respond by, wanting to maintain their pricing strategy and premium price over those coffee shops. And the reason they do this is because they worry it's going to dilute their brand, right? So if they start cost cutting, they're worried that like they are no longer going to be seen as a premium brand and a luxury item. But in times where like luxury items aren't being purchased as frequently and customers are feeling a pinch, I'm really curious to see how they react here domestically, and especially in China.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, what are their options, right? Like, is it to basically it's continue to keep your price point or drop it?
Yeah, continue to keep your price point, drop it is really where it is. In terms of sales, like you'll see probably, their Starbucks rewards program be a little more aggressive. They might do more promotions with specific credit card companies that allow for it, especially as Dunkin' has now partnered with Amex, right? So they'll probably lean more into that. And then trying to, if they have the cash flow, maybe open new stores in areas that are still like willing to pay that premium price and still expand probably at a slower level, but only selectively expand in areas where there's a large distribution of consumers that haven't really felt that pinch, right? Because it is, when you think of the economy and the pinch based on the prices, not everybody's feeling it the same.
Gotcha.
So they can still expand, but it's going to cost a lot of money, and you're probably not going to see the ROI like as quickly as they would generally see it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Customer loyalty programs. Starbucks has always been I think, phenomenal case study in this. They do it incredibly well with one, creating a loyal fan base, but then incentivizing them with their customer loyalty program. Alex, you don't have a Starbucks or don't really pay attention to your Starbucks customer loyalty program, but you are a Panera loyalty member.
Well, yeah, I think Panera's model is a bit simpler
Okay.
than Starbucks. To my knowledge, like Starbucks are kind of building up like a level, right? Like through your stars.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, I think Panera used to have that model. Now they've kind of shifted over to, we'll hand you a discount every 5 visits.
Oh, it's just every 5 months you got it.
It's like pretty simple now. Well, actually, it's Panera week, so
It doesn't matter like what you purchase, like for different purchases.
I think it's pretty flat. So I have this at Club for Panera, so I'm getting drinks there pretty frequently.
You just get the device from come in.
Yeah, exactly. And so they've created a pretty solid habit loop with me, and I assume that's Panera's intention.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes I can kind of see like a gap, specifically, right? Like for me, there's no difference if I grab my free coffee from Panera and then go grab my food from Wendy's, versus grabbing my food and my drink and like getting an additional reward out of Panera. But yeah, just I think we're about to talk through this a bit, but Panera is actually doing a promotion right now where it's Panera week, so every visit counts as 2 visits actually.
Yeah, it's gonna be going.
Yeah, and so like,
week.
so yeah, I'm especially incentivized to go this week.
Right.
But yeah, and there's just a ton of coupons too. So
On price, you think like a BOGO or something?
yeah, so there's BOGOs. There's like a couple dollars off, right? So yeah, there's just a lot of incentive to spend.
That makes sense. When you think of Starbucks customer loyalty program, right? I've only used it maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, but I've seen people live and die by it. It incentivizes customers to use their app or their Starbucks card and earn stars, right? For every dollar spent. You can use the stars to buy and get items for free, essentially like a form of currency. And then you could get, a wide variety of drinks depending on how many stars you have. It is tiered, like you said, right? So you can reach a higher tier, and based on your higher tier, you can earn a free drink or food item, or just have more options available to you in terms of early releases for products. So if there's a new drink coming out, depending on your tier or how many stars you have, you might get early access. They will often have double star days or personalized challenges. Their data and ability to target specific customer segments has always, I think, impressed the market. I think they take a very good IE approach, right? They will incentivize on specific days, right? A lot of times when you get your paycheck, but also at specific hours. So during periods of those non-peak periods, if they know you're close to a Starbucks, or based on like the number of days since your last transaction or how close you are to receiving your paycheck, they'll ping you, give you a coupon to come in at that time to get a wide variety of drinks. And again, the coupons are mainly for more stars. So I think it's a little rarer to see a true price promotion and like traditional BOGO at Starbucks, because one, they don't want to dilute the brand. They do want it to come off as premium price, but then there's advantages for the long term in doing that. So when you think of a BOGO, let's say you go to Dunkin', and I don't know if Dunkin' does this. If Dunkin' says, get 1 iced coffee, buy one iced coffee, get another one free, the value of your transaction, the total value of that transaction is realized in one transaction, right? You buy it once, you have 2 coffees right now. Amazing. At Starbucks, when they offer you more stars for drinks, like let's say you get a Frappuccino, get 30 extra stars, or 3 times the number of stars you would have gotten for that Frappuccino. The total value of those stars or that transaction isn't realized until later. So you have to come back to Starbucks, make another transaction, or at that point spend your stars to feel like you've really gotten that whole value of that transaction, right? It's kind of an investment for later. And in that way, they kind of get you into that loop. And it almost feels like you're investing in a future transaction at Starbucks. And so you'll have to go back to Starbucks to use it. Not super uncommon, right? Like, I think most retail fast food chains have adopted this, varying degrees of success based on their tech and digital structure and UI. Chick-fil-A's app is very similar, but in terms of the data, the promotions, that's where it feels like Starbucks has really done a great job with theirs, as well as, yes.
Yeah, and I want to jump in here real quick because I'm kind of curious. You have thoughts like this. So back to like Starbucks as a brand. Starbucks is very much about like creating that connection between barista and customer. And when I think about Chick-fil-A and some of the promotions they push through their app, I think depending on like which Chick-fil-A I've been near, and this could totally be automated and I'm falling for the system, but I'll get a message that'll be like, hey, like Steve, general manager of your local Chick-fil-A at Celebration, Florida, or wherever I was living at the time, it'll say like, yeah, so like Steve, general manager of the Celebration, Florida Chick-fil-A, would like to thank you for coming to our Chick-fil-A. Here's a coupon for a free chicken biscuit.
Interesting. So we come from...
Yeah, and so they're trying to create kind of like that like personalized experience.
Yeah. I think that fits in really well with Chick-fil-A. Like, right. Old brand of... You like answer their operation when they say, like, was it my pleasure for serving?
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they want you to have a connection to your closest.
Yeah. No, yeah, I was just like, that feels like something Starbucks would do too, right?
I've never seen that. I've always seen them be more generic, like promotion.
Gotcha.
Double rewards day, or like
gotcha.
Flying, for example, you get double the rewards when you have a flight and you connect yours to your Delta.
Yeah. Gotcha. But you know, analytically though, like that's such a like wealth of data and like an interesting problem to solve, right? Because you're trying to solve for the propensity of your customer to take a deal. On top of that, right? Like it sounds like they're trying to create a sense of urgency to like realize the deal.
Will expire commercially.
Yeah.
No, it's huge. I think that's like where when you think of the data advantage or competing on analytics, like Starbucks has done a great job. One, gathering a rich source of data, segmenting it probably really well, and then understanding customers, and then continuing to test and see how the customers react, whether it's price changes, promotions, frequencies. Like they have it at a pretty granular level at this point. So they probably know who's spending, who's not spending, where the contracting markets are. And the level of discounts they probably need per segment to get people spending again.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so Starbucks reward program is massive and does a good job for them. One way they also differentiate their program a bit is with their prepaid bundle. So I think I saw this once years ago where someone had done a breakdown of how Starbucks sometimes acts like a bank. It's not true bank, but I think it's really clever the way they've been able to do this, and because not a lot of companies do this in general, right? Starbucks will incentivize you to load money on your app or your Starbucks card and then use them for future purposes or purchases, and they're holding your money sometimes for an extended period of time, right? This like allows Starbucks to have access to a pool of funds and have this like stored value, which is essentially an interest-free loan from their customers, right? So that they need to have the cash flow to expand, to put more into R&D, to pay off debt. Their customers are allowing them to do that by, preloading these accounts, and then it's acting as deferred revenue later. So even though we talk about a lot of fast food chains having a mirrored or similar structure in terms of their rewards or promotions. Not a ton of them incentivize the prepaid model and have the true card the way Starbucks does. Again, allows them that interest-free cash, improve cash flow. And the big one here too is lower transaction fees. So if you pay through a credit card, Starbucks is paying for a transaction fee depending on your carrier. If you're just loading money from your debit account to a Starbucks app and then paying there, they're not paying that transaction. So they're saving 2-3% per transaction. They can push that to consumers to either buy more or just make more money.
Gotcha.
So yeah, pretty huge there. I think when we talked about this earlier, you brought up like comparing loyalty rewards for like airlines and like how airlines use points as currency.
Yeah.
You can generally buy more points, and that's like, I guess, your way of purchasing or like loading money onto a specific airline app. But the value fluctuations are massive, right? It almost never worth it to buy points.
Gotcha.
I've never seen it be the case.
Yep.
Yeah, young lie. But Starbucks is dollar for dollar, right? It's much more approachable because it's not like I'm buying stars that you may change the redemption rewards at some point. I'm just putting my money in this app. So I still have the money. The money didn't leave. I didn't spend it. I just have it somewhere else. Yeah. That's what it feels like from a consumer sentiment perspective. Otherwise, when I look at an airline, it's like I spent that money and now I have to use it. But I've also like lost the value in it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Sorry, tangent time. Yeah, no, I was just thinking about this and like, okay, what are like the additional benefits of a prepaid model? I think to like maybe when I was like 13, 14 years old, like start walking home from like middle high school, right? It's like a 2-3 mile walk. I pass by a Starbucks. But at that point, right, and maybe the times have changed and I'm just being a boomer. But at that time, if I wanted to buy lunch or if I wanted to pay for something, I was probably paying for it with cash.
Yeah.
Which is kind of silly because like I couldn't have a card at like 13, 14 years old.
Most of the kids don't really have a credit card.
Yeah.
Part of that age.
Yeah, like most kids don't have a card, and maybe it's changed now. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, well, if my parent preloaded money onto my Starbucks app,
yeah,
and I can now spend using this prepaid money, now it's like a very easy way to say like, oh, let's just go to Starbucks because I don't have to deal with cash, like as a kid.
And your parents can set up an auto reload for you. Yeah, want to get something after school every day, like a snack while you're studying. Like,
yeah,
yeah, makes it easy.
There's like auto reload, or even then, it's like almost like an allowance, right? Like you preset like, hey, like we're giving you $50 to spend on Starbucks for like the school year. Like, don't go over it. But in my head, right, like that's $50 they wouldn't have spent normally.
True. I think Apple does the same thing with the Apple Card or the Apple Cash Card, I should say. Yeah. Like when you're in your wallet. So I think I'm curious to see how parents are using that today. Like if they're giving their kids cash, 'cause I don't carry cash at all. But they could just, keep, if they have an iPhone, or some first phones, they can have a prepaid card there. Apple makes it easy because you can just auto reload or send cash value at any point, and as long as they take Apple Pay, they'll be able to take that Apple Card as well. So I think Apple's done a good job of seeing that and trying to act similarly. I don't know what the take rate is in comparison. And then kudos to, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but with Dunkin' and Amex now collaborating and partnering, where if you have like the Amex Gold Card, and I believe the Platinum as well, you get $7 back every month for Dunkin' purchases. So if you buy something from Dunkin', Amex covers $7 per month. And so there's an incentive to use it every month because it doesn't carry over, right? You can't use $14 you didn't use it last month. One, it gets people to go to Dunkin' more often, gets me to go to Dunkin' more often. But two, if you're clever about it and you don't use Dunkin' that much, if you never want to have to pay $1 from your own quote-unquote pocket, you would just set up auto reload from your card to a Dunkin' gift card on the app, $7 every month. And that's what me and a lot of credit card holders are doing, right? Because the idea is like, well, now Amex introduced this higher annual fee. This is baked in. I'm going to redeem this reward. And my sentiment or feeling is like, oh, it's Amex's money. It's not my money. But it's still coming out of my pocket at a portion, right? But it's still going to drive me to Dunkin' at some point. And so now it's creating this habit where I have like this auto reload setup. Fortunately, with the car, I'm only paying a portion of that through like the higher annual fee. But I think they are breaking into that a little bit, at least from a habit forming perspective. I don't know how long it'll stick with folks, but they've now allowed that to be quick and easy, and certainly incentivized it because it's like Amex is paying for my Dunkin'.
Yeah. Me. And real quick, the context around the Amex is it's the Amex Gold card, right?
Yeah, Amex Gold for sure. I think the Platinum as well.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could go to Dunkin' and just use it and use your Amex card every month. But generally, like, I only buy beans from Dunkin' or like ground coffee because I now have this incentive. And then I think it costs $9 to buy a bag of ground coffee at Dunkin'. So I still end up paying $2. And I never want to pay that $2. So I just auto reload and, maybe I'll treat the interns to some dozen or 2 dozen donuts at the end of the year. But that's the idea. So again, Starbucks has done an incredibly good job with their loyalty program. It's often studied and emulated by other companies by combining their digital payment model and loyalty rewards. They've really been able to build a strong fan base and then have cash on hand more than they usually would to keep expanding or just being in a better financial situation altogether. Yeah, so that's Starbucks. We talked about their business strategy, humble beginnings, how they've created this, this aura of being a third place. We talked about menu diversification, their menu strategy, and how they've expanded worldwide. And then another huge component of their business has been this rich data stream and direct line to their consumers with their rewards program. Wanted to talk about Starbucks today. Especially their failed succession plans, right? Starbucks has really struggled with this since Howard Schultz left the first time around, right? So he's had multiple tenures. He was CEO from 1986 to 2000, and then they had 2 CEOs in between. 2008, he came back, was CEO from 2008 to 2017, passed it off to someone else, tried to bring them through COVID. COVID really hit them hard, so he stepped back in, and the idea was to reset the business. Passes the business off again to a new CEO. That CEO lasts 18 months, and Lakshman Narasimhan is out. They found a new CEO, and Howard Schultz is back in the mix, which is being much more involved. Again, his impact for Starbucks can be understated, right? He did take Starbucks from a small chain to international giant, and really popularized this idea of a third place between work and home. He led the company through the 2008 financial crisis and helped bring it back to its core principles post-COVID. He is credited with making it such a large cultural and global icon, bringing the coffee-based innovation of the Frappuccino and PSL to the forefront, and setting up the Starbucks Rewards program. So he's had a great strategic vision and done well from a performance standpoint. Do you want to talk about when he left in 2000? I guess we'll go 20, 24 years back, of where the succession planning, we've seen it fail multiple times, right? So he steps down, Howard Schultz steps down in 2000, Orrin Smith comes in. He, I think, was a pretty decent CEO. Like, from what we researched, he was known for his steady, responsible approach. He had an emphasis on profitability and sustainability, and was really focused on Starbucks' social mission during this time. So when you think of ethical sources, good environmental practices, I think Howard Schultz did a good job at employee benefits, but Orin Smith really doubled down on getting and making sure that employees had good benefits, and then did grow the business, but it was in a much more sustainable fashion, right? He didn't want to be overly aggressive and expand and then dilute the brand, or be cash strapped. He wanted to focus on some of the more ethical components, the feel goods, and expand at the same time.
Kind of curious for your thoughts right here. I'm jumping in real quick. But thinking through premium brands, does slow, sustainable expansion, like I feel like that kind of lines up with how premium brands should operate. And so I'm curious to hear like why maybe Howard Schultz had to come back in and take over.
Yeah. So he didn't take it back over from Orin Smith. I think a lot of people agree that Orin Smith's tenure was largely successful, especially with the focus on ethical sourcing and being more sustainable and a more socially responsible brand. He retired in 2005. So he had his 5 years. He was done. The criticism he received from the board and other people was that he was too conservative with the expansion plan. Like he didn't expand fast enough, and he left a lot of growth opportunities on the table. And so when you are in a situation where people want to see larger growth, higher stock prices, higher returns, even though he retired more or less on his own footing, that's where his criticism came in, and really where the next CEO caused a little bit of trouble for Starbucks, right? So Jim Donald comes in. Jim Donald had a background in retail and really, I think, leaned into the criticism that Orin Smith had and aggressively expanded Starbucks, right? So he pushed for rapidly increasing the number of Starbucks stores domestically and internationally. He wanted Starbucks to be a market leader, but when you grow this fast, it generally comes at a cost, right? They lost a lot of their quality control, their operational efficiency or excellence, and then they had brand dilution. So there was an oversaturation of Starbucks in certain markets. They were competing, cannibalizing each other's sales. It wasn't sustainable. A lot of stores had to close during that time, and then at the same time, he's really focused on like expansion and growth. They're not as focused on making sure it's scalable and sustainable from an operation. So it started to lose its premium feel. Customers were pretty upset at like long wait times. We're seeing that again today. And the overall experience at Starbucks. So that's the next 3 years really after Orin Smith under Jim Donald. Yeah. And so with so many people complaining about the experience and the service, that's where Howard Schultz comes back in, right? He comes back in 2008. It's a tough time to come back in. But he's kind of like the hero in that part of the story. He wants to reassure investors, consumers, and reestablish the focus on quality and premium branding. So he actually closes almost 1,000 stores. And when you think of people want to see growth and expansion, that's like a risky move as a CEO to say, no, we're going to dial it back, right? Because this is who we are. And so you can kind of see why Starbucks has reluctance to play on price, expand rapidly, because they don't want to lose that premium branding again, because it's burned them before. So he comes back in, he pushes that renewed strategy. He wants to, I think, quote, restore the soul of Starbucks back to his core principles in the first place, right? Being that third place, but high level of operational efficiency and customer service. And then again, with the coffee-based innovation. And so he closes a lot of stores. He pushes for customers not revisioning the brand, but associating the brand with more premium services and products. So when we think of the partnerships with Disney, Disney, Target, that's where you can see that relationship really start to form when it came back the second time, because he wanted people to associate Starbucks in the same light as other premium brands. Yep. He started the Starbucks Reward program. I wouldn't say his team did. And then close to 8 to 9 years later, he's ready to step down. He talks about feelings of burnout, but he wants to wanted to shift leadership off to someone with a strong technology background and wanted to make sure they could modernize the company. So they did advocate for Kevin Johnson, a former Microsoft executive, right? So a lot of tech background here, to be the next CEO, be a successor, and push Starbucks in the age of digital transformation. So Kevin Johnson really leans into his background here, right? He is a tech guy. He's a tech-savvy executive. He starts to emphasize that digital transformation and really pushes the Starbucks Rewards program and mobile ordering. You know this as an IE. I know this as an IE. A lot of IEs, those especially working at Disney, might know this. There's an operational tax to mobile ordering, right? It does allow you to sometimes have higher transaction values and take in more volume, but it is hard to do both, right? In any fast food operation.
Like it's effectively like another register, like, but a lot of, I think, non-engineers tend to think of it more as an additional sales, like truly just like additional sales, not just an additional register.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was a huge challenge for them, right? So they had digital successes in terms of people using mobile ordering more and seeing the convenience, but the in-store experiences suffered as a cost of that, because generally most places, I think, prioritize the mobile ordering, and then you have longer wait times, operational strain, and this is, I think, where the labor relations issues start to emerge as people start to want to unionize and feel overworked and underpaid by Starbucks, and then it creates those sort of public relations issues as well. He did also have to try and navigate Starbucks through COVID-19, but that kind of doubled down on the strategy he already wanted to have, and kind of what bit them in the backside was because
taking the register out of the
exactly taking the register out, leaning into mobile ordering and drive-throughs, and so they had to they just lean into it further, creating more operational strain for themselves, and then hard to, again, once COVID is like done, retrain your baristas and partners to handle both and not just one. But then you still want to give the convenience to your customers that they can do it. So finding that right balance was pretty tough. So he did retire in 2022 amid all of those challenges. And I think Howard Schultz steps in the interim, right? He wasn't named like true CEO. He was interim CEO at the time. He brings in, eventually, Lakshman Narasimhan, and we should probably get into this at some point, but there is a huge tree of PepsiCo executives that have left PepsiCo and are now executives at other companies. And some have done well. Some have been okay.
I forgot his name, but the guy that ran Apple
Which one?
after Steve Jobs.
Oh, I don't remember his name.
I think this one was a big one because Steve Jobs poached him out of PepsiCo, to become CEO of Apple. And then I think that CEO ended up being the one that ousted Steve Jobs.
Oh, right.
Before Steve Jobs came back and ousted him. Yeah. So sorry, tangent.
But it's interesting to see PepsiCo in this way, because it feels like, if for those who call like college football, like Nick Saban has a tree of coaches that came from his line, that were his assistant coaches, and now have their own programs, are doing incredibly well. Greg Popovich in the NBA, very similar, like has a great tree of like people that worked for him and now have gone off and done their own things. PepsiCo feels like that. Like they're PepsiCo executives at Disney that are pretty recent, that are like high up there. I think a lot of them do have consulting backgrounds at some point. We'll dive deeper into that maybe another episode. But yeah, Lakshman Narasimhan comes in, right? He has an expertise on global markets. And I think the idea was, he was going to really focus on global expansion for Starbucks. He brought an outside perspective, and he focused on data-driven decision-making, big buzzword there. What was interesting, I think, for everybody to see, was he took a very slow approach to making any large changes at Starbucks. He wanted to train as a barista and connect directly with Starbucks employees. Like, he wanted to understand what the operation truly was like, but he spent a lot of time doing that. And he took on this piece of super commuting super commuting, where he would travel to a bunch of different Starbucks locations and stores and offices to connect with the people there. I think a part of that was in reaction to like the labor relations issues, and he wanted to be seen more of a like ground up CEO, someone who knew the business and understood it well. And also coming in as an outsider, like it makes sense to spend some amount of time in the operation, especially because, you know, Howard Schultz is like cares about this, and this is one of the missions and core principles of Starbucks. But he didn't make a ton of changes like straight. He wanted to spend time getting to know the business.
I think jumping in there real quick, like I think of like similar businesses, and I'm trying to think what the added value is, but like Chick-fil-A, for example, if you work at the support center, you're required to work 2 days in a store every year.
Annually, 2 days.
Yeah. But it's like, it's to help like kind of connect that like ground level viewpoint to the executive viewpoint. And yeah, and I can definitely see the value of it, especially if you're coming in from the outside.
I agree.
And just like and if we're thinking that like, sorry, I'm trying to tie the pieces together, but if you're thinking that like, in theory, we didn't set the mobile order expectations properly, then we've now essentially added a lot of sales that is unsustainable for the level of experience that we're planning around, or that our customers have come to expect. I can see that being a very quick way for him to learn the like level of pressure that's being placed on individual stores. But yeah.
That's a good point. And also just like when they talk about operational changes or issues, at least he has the language and he's able to visualize what that all looks like and why, you know, what issues may be more pertinent if you are trying to introduce different menu items, for example. Because that was part of his like process. He wanted to revitalize store operations, streamline these processes, address the workforce issues. But what was really exciting for me, and this is where I think I started following the story, was he made a comment on wanting to introduce, well, one, increase global expansion and touch new markets, but introduce more non-coffee based products to appeal to diverse tastes. And so me and probably everyone else in the Indian community was super excited because we're like, here it is, right? Masala chai at Starbucks. Lakshman Narasimhan is going to do it. Like if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be this guy. But that didn't happen, right? He spends like 4 to 6 months training as a barista. And Starbucks during that time is continuing to see declining sales, right? Global sales dropped 3 to 4% in subsequent quarters. So quarter to quarter, it continues to drop. He really tried to lean into mobile order again, but it became an operational nightmare. I think what they were trying to do is like push a lot of mobile orders and promotions through the app. But employees, barista did not love the operational strain, right? They further exacerbates the public relations and labor relations issues that Starbucks is having. Yeah.
Again, real quick, curious for your thoughts, because I kind of want to dig into this whole mobile order side of the business.
Which side of the business? Mobile order.
Mobile order specifically. Because in my head, you can make mobile order work if you actually plan your capacity and your wait times around your store's true capacity. All right. So being that they are claiming to be a data-driven organization, in my head, right, like the pieces of data you need to predict the proper wait time for a mobile order to properly balance your store capacity, right? Like you would pull your historical non-mobile order transactions, then overlaying your mobile order. You should really only be setting inventory for, I guess, like pickup times on the times when you have excess capacity. But it feels like that's not what they're doing, right?
No, it's. I think them and other businesses are trying to push more people through a mobile order.
In general, yeah. So they're trying to change the adoption, but they haven't seen the cannibalization almost,
right,
of mobile order to in store.
People who have already shifted.
Yeah.
Like people who want to come in person, grab some things.
But on top of that, right now it's like when you come in person, you see a shorter line.
Yeah.
And so there's an expectation that you're getting your drink really fast.
That's the point. And then probably like when you don't, or like when we have feels longer, you're even more frustrated because you're like, I ordered and like all these other orders are coming through mobile order and you're prioritizing all of them over me. Like I haven't seen you make my drink yet, but you're making like 15 others.
Gotcha. So the service standard essentially went down, right?
So you saw a lot of this like customer frustration, and then one important thing to note was like they even saw this might be more of like the specific operational inefficiencies they had. But one of the most interesting things they called out was that they saw a large drop in their conversion rate from cart to checkout, or cart to like actual ordering, once people really saw that wait time. So wait times were increasing during this period of time, and then you saw people balk, right? You saw people like
they essentially had the stuff in their cart. They saw the wait time. They were like,
nope, never mind.
Peace. Yep. Which in my head, like that's the behavior that is okay, right? Like you would, in my head, if you wanted to, like if your priorities were actually your service standard and your quality for like your long-term business success instead of like in the moment an additional couple sales, you would probably want those mobile orderers to bulk for the time being, until you see more adoption. And as you see more adoption, right, like you dynamically modify your mobile inventory levels.
I think where you don't want to lose it though is like you don't want people to break the habit.
Gotcha. Yeah, like like to build adoption, like you have to prioritize it over.
People start associating their mobile order or their like breakfast routine of like picking up Starbucks on the way to work or at whatever time they do. One or two times you check the app and the wait time's too long and you don't go. You're going to just start associating a long wait time with Starbucks and just maybe find an alternative.
Like this is the easiest way to create adoption and get people to switch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so really struggled with that. And then, the public backlash with the boycotts over Palestine, Israel. He wasn't really able to push Starbucks to compete well here in the U.S. A lot of other chains for cheaper really took over that part of the market. So you didn't see like coffee consumption overall in the U.S. dip. You saw McDonald's, Dunkin' really take the customers that Starbucks lost. And then they've really struggled a bit more in China with Luckin Coffee being much more aggressive. And as Chinese consumers start to lean more into, I guess, have more pride around Chinese-made products, Starbucks and other retailers are going to see this issue and struggle with it. And so they continue to struggle in China. So Lakshman Narasimhan's out. September 9th, they brought in Brian Niccol. He was the CEO of Chipotle before this. And so in the industry, he's recognized as a turnaround expert because he came into Chipotle after they were struggling. So again, Chipotle was a company that had high growth for a long time. They hit a set of issues with, I can't remember, it was not a neurovirus.
It was a lettuce, it was E. coli.
E. coli.
Outbreaks.
I think they had operational issues as well. Yeah,
I think like the core Chipotle is like when you are using like fresher organic ingredients, like there's some risk with that. On top of that, right, I think it feels like one of the earlier restaurants to popularize a very customizable fast casual experience.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, is it fast casual or fast food? But like a fast casual experience where everything is like customizable. So like operationally, I'm sure it was like hard for them to stand up and scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then when he stepped in, he really put them back into the driver's seat a little bit, helped Chipotle continue to grow and reduce the number of outbreaks. So that's kind of why they wanted him here. Again, just more so because he's considered a turnaround expert in the business, and has, a part of with Chipotle is like there's a large in-store operation that needs to be on the focus. And so Lakshman Narasimhan coming from PepsiCo, it's not really the same. Whereas like he had to spend time learning to be a barista and seeing the operation. Brian Niccol knows it. He's known for his decisive leadership. Apparently he started making changes on day 2 of the job. So power to Brian Niccol. I'm curious to see how he approaches the issues here at home and then China as well. There's a rumor, I don't know, I think it's true, I need to double check, that he's going to be super commuting to the Seattle office from his home. Like he's going to be, getting on a jet, getting on a plane, flying a ton. I think he's in office like 3 days, and then working from home 2, if not flying out every day. I don't know how sustainable that is, but the company kind of agreed to it to get him on board, and he has a massive pay package. So they're all in for Brian Niccol at CEO. Their stock price jumped a huge amount when he was announced. So Wall Street, we'll say, has good confidence in him. But he has a lot of issues. Not him personally, but there's a lot of issues with this company at this moment. And we'll see how he handles it.
Hey, 2025 June, Alex here. Sid, how has Brian Nichols done since December?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Alex. The best way to say how Brian Nichols and Starbucks has performed since he stepped into it in September, and then what they did in 2024 was delayed their business forecasts and future-looking statements to say, hey, give Brian time to think about the business, assess the business, and come up with a plan. So he was given a little bit of grace at that moment. And as he went on the news cycle with interviews and talking publicly about his back to Starbucks approach, there was a lot of hype around Starbucks. I think there was a lot of excitement with him stepping in. The stock price rose to $120 at its peak, and then since then has come really crashing back down to where it was. So it's pretty mixed, right? In terms of realized value, is Starbucks back? No, definitely at least not yet. They released Q2 earnings last month, and their tagline or their headline was, progress on the back to Starbucks strategy is driving confidence in a turnaround because their net revenues were up 2% year over year. But if you dig into their earnings call and even their fiscal year 2025 results, just the report itself, the results don't look that good, right? 2% up in terms of net revenues, but global store sales declined 1%, right? There's no real growth that Starbucks is seeing here. North America is still struggling. Their store sales declined 1%. They had a large drop in similar transactions. What they did was they increased prices when he stepped in. And so it's kind of offset the decline in transactions and sales. And then their non-China international stores have really helped them stay afloat, not even grow, right? So it's not looking great. I think that's reflected in the stock price today. In the past month or so, I haven't seen Brian Nichols talk as much. But in terms of what his strategy was, and there's still potential for those results to be realized. One of the first things he did, I think it was in early February, were layoffs, right? So he laid off about 7% of their non-retail workforce. 1,100 non-retail workers were laid off from Starbucks. And, from an operating expense component, given some time, you'll see the effect of not having that much or that many workers on payroll. And so you should see profitability go up, but that's not really doing anything for their sales. So you might see stuff there. In the most recent interview I saw, he focused on mobile order and fixing mobile order. And so we talked about previous CEOs, especially Lakshman Narasimhan, really diving into getting mobile order right or just growing the footprint of mobile order. I thought that Brian Nichols would be more focused on the in-store experience, and it seems like they're trying to focus on both. So they're splitting their focus into these two areas. So he wants to get mobile order right. And I think because I don't really use their mobile order and we are pretty much here at Disney all the time, there are components of our mobile order system that I thought they already had because they seem like the things that make the most sense. So one of the things he talked about in his most recent interview was people will often place a mobile order and get a notification that their mobile order will be ready in 3 minutes. But they're physically not 3 minutes away from the location. So there's no geofencing approach of when to actually push an order to Starbucks or the location. And so you'll see mobile orders just sitting there ready. But then by the time someone comes, it's cold or it's, watered down. So I'm kind of shocked that they didn't have that system up until this point. Where you can either set a specific scheduled time for your mobile order to be ready, or some sort of geofencing component to alert the store when they should actually make the order.
Gotcha. Can I read that back to you?
Yeah.
It's almost like they have no prioritization or capacity planning strategy in their mobile order.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I think they've really struggled with that. Even I don't even know what their mobile order inventory looks like, right? So they should have an inventory cap if they're capped out at a certain store, and then because Starbucks aren't generally too far away from each other, if there's another store that has a capacity for it to push you there. Sure. But that's probably a larger strategy at play that I don't know if they're taking that part on. He also has a new wait time standard. So he's trying to get all drinks ready within 4 minutes.
Gotcha.
Which is good if they can get it right. I don't know how they enforce that truly, but it will be like you need to have some sort of mobile order inventory system or be able to have more flexible worker capacity for like the morning rushes to make that happen. Yeah, so that's mobile order. They're also focused on fixing the in-store experience. So I think if this has been on the news, and it was a little controversial when it first came out, was the new code of conduct, right? So somewhat related, but it stands alone. They did close some stores in, I'll say, rougher neighborhoods or areas because they felt like the workers were not in a safe place and they're running into more issues than it was worth. And then two, previously, anyone could come to Starbucks and hang out, right? That was their third place strategy. It was open, it was welcoming. And that's not to say it's not welcoming today, but regardless of a purchase, you could stay at Starbucks, use the restroom, and just exist. But according to Nichols, that policy was taken advantage of, and you are now required to make a purchase, to hang out, to use the restroom as well. And that's pretty industry standard. I think Starbucks had the most open policy, and now they're just, I guess, right-sizing that.
Yeah, I guess in my opinion, like that code of conduct, I guess, I think for me, like I've impulse purchased multiple times because in my head I'm like, oh, Starbucks is a reliable restroom.
Yeah.
Let me run in there, use the restroom, grab a drink, just because social norms, I feel bad. But I remember I was in Little Tokyo the first time I realized they changed that code of conduct. Oh. And so Little Tokyo in LA famously has like barely any restrooms.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's only like table service restaurants that really have restrooms.
Yeah.
And so if you're just like walking around, grabbing food, grabbing drinks in Little Tokyo, there's no restroom.
Okay.
And so I remember I'd gone in December the prior year.
Yep.
And like knew that Starbucks was there, went in to the restroom, used it, grabbed a quick drink after, and like walked out.
Yep.
Versus in the following year, like more recently when I went to Little Tokyo, like they were like, nope, no restroom. And I was like out of spite, I went to find like a table service, ordered an appetizer, sat down, use a restroom.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like you're, not to say a spiteful person, but you are one who will out of spite. Like, you know what? I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah. So anyways, like honestly, restrooms were probably the only reason I've been using Starbucks since all the boycott stuff happened.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and then the in-store experience is another component of it. During COVID, they got rid of a lot of furniture, right? They either packed it up and like plastic wrapped it in a corner, or they had to get rid of it just to make space to accommodate reopening. Some stores have reinvested in like putting the furniture back. Other stores haven't, so there's still like a gap in a lot of stores in that it looks pretty empty. And so there really isn't that third place to like set up shop and like sit down for a while or relax. And so this is a longer lead time approach, but I think one place they'll reinvest is standing up, like having the right interior design to accommodate a comfortable third place. It reminds me a little bit of what Red Lobster is doing now with their interior redesign, but it's expensive. And so that'll probably take time to actually happen. Something they could use the free cash flow for now that the layoffs are done. And then lastly, this is a small note, but he's pushed for writing on cups again. So for a while, they would just print out the receipt, stop it to the cup. They're pushing for their partners or baristas to write in Sharpie. I don't think the idea is to mess up people's name essentially so it becomes a meme again like it did in the past. But some of the phrases are quite cute. And the idea is if you can make a guest or a customer smile with a small note, then it's worth it. And you increase that relationship or bond people have with Starbucks. So they're focusing on that again, even though it adds a little bit of a lead time to your drinks. Cool. So that wraps up our episode on Starbucks. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the company's history, strategies, and current challenges, which there is a lot. It's been a fascinating journey, and we'll continue to follow Starbucks. And we hope that you continue to follow this story now that you have all of the relevant background for it. If you found this episode insightful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And the only thing we ask is that you share it with someone who this episode reminded you of. So if you have a Starbucks fan in your life or someone who introduced you to coffee and kind of, incited an addiction like I have today, that you share it with them and spread kind of the word.
Yeah. And we'd especially like to give a special shout out to everyone who encouraged us to put this out there. Thank you for your support. We're excited to increase the frequency of these episodes and bring you more in-depth analyses of companies and market trends. And excited to keep learning. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.